It say some destinations have error. Facebook. Okay, it ain't working on Facebook, but we good on um Twitch. Oh shit. That's what I was doing wrong. Oh no, that is right. That's the right podcast. Um, and we good on YouTube. It say I tested on my other phone, but hey, we live. The truth IRL in real life. So what I'm doing today? Today I'm just cutting fruit. I got big old nice big bowl of strawberries. I got some more mangoes. Let me show you how much mangoes I cut already. I cut this much mangoes, and I still got a bunch more in case we need more. Ugh. I cut this much pineapple, and I'm cutting quite a bit of strawberries. What I usually do is I make fruit bowls, but right now I'm only using 5 fruits. I usually do 11 fruit, but I'm making a different variation of the bowl. On my website that I'm about to launch, it's gonna be called the Lover Boy. Don't ask me why, but it only is gonna have watermelon, pineapple, mango, strawberry, kiwi. It's gonna be the 4 fruits in there. So to fill 32 ounces is obviously gonna take quite a bit of fruit to fill 36 ounces of only 5 fruits compared to when I put 11 different fruit inside of there. So gonna take a lot of it. And I'm probably gonna sell the bowls for like $10 to $12, just depending on where I'm at. Right. So this is how I make my money. I can take a $10 watermelon, I can cut it up into cubes, I can put it in 32-ounce deli containers, and I can make 10, 12 bowls. That's how you turn 10, $20 into $120. So you just gotta learn how to work smart, not hard. And then I'm building a whole business out of it. Pretty soon we'll be doing fruit, acai bowls, fresh juices, likely wellness shots, sea moss. And then we'll probably dive into actually fresh fruit, whole fruit as well too, added as well. So just want to make healthy things accessible for my community because I fell in love with fruit and it's a good snack. It can help cut down on all the sugar intake. It can cut down on all of the addictions and the cravings, and it can actually heal the body, energize the body. It's actually fuel for the body. This is the ultimate fuel that you can get for your body. So I eat a lot of fruit, and one way I wanted to be able to pass that on is to I started selling fruit. That's how much I fell in love with it. So I already cut most of the fruit. Only thing I really got to do left is my strawberries, my kiwis, and my watermelon. So I guess I'm not almost done. I still got 3 fruit to do left, and it took me a while just to do the mangoes and the pineapples because I cut a few of them. And if you want to check out my Instagram, I got a video on quick ways to cut mangoes and pineapples that I'm about to drop too. So follow me at underscore D Truth. But what I was doing, I was in here cutting my fruit and I was listening to some Alan Watts. If you don't know who Alan Watts is he was a philosopher and he talked about consciousness basically and the oneness of everything. And instead of me going into it, I'm just gonna listen to some Alan Watts like I was doing. I would recommend you go look into it. The ones that I would recommend the most, if you just starting off, I would say listen to um, Alan Watts Being in the Way podcast, part three, episode three, and then episode 13, I think it is. But I'll listen to a lot of them, but those are ones that resonate with me personally. Uh, that always stick out. So right now, I'm just cutting. I already soaked my fruit in baking soda, apple cider vinegar, washed it down real good. Made sure that the fruit was really clean. So I'm probably using my second board at the moment. I'm only going to use that when it's time for my watermelon. But I got a pot brewing over here. I'm going to show you in a minute. It got mango, pineapple in here, the scraps, the seeds that was left from the pineapple I cut, and the cores that was left from the mango I cut, and some leaves from the pineapple that I cleaned as thoroughly as possible as well. And it's seeping over here. And eventually I'm going to put it on a low boil. And I'm going to make some mango, pineapple, maybe add a little strawberry, ginger tea as well too, and then I'll probably end up chilling it as well too, making it a cold drink. But even with parts like this on the strawberry, right? I can take the whole thing and put it in there. But to just cut it off like that, and then once that boils down and actually refines and turns and pulls all the astringents out of the strawberry and then break down and I filter it and get that pure strawberry water tea mixture, it's gonna be good, especially with the pineapple and mango. So just boiling down leftover fruit. If you wash your strawberries really, really good, cinnamon, some apple cider vinegar, with some baking soda for about 10, 15 minutes and rinse them off and probably do it again. You can throw the whole thing in here. And the only reason I say that is because these leaves and a lot of things like that, especially with like pineapples too, they carry a lot of dirt when they pick them out the ground. So you want to make sure when you making teas with any type of fruit, you want to make sure you're cleaning um, the inside and the outside of your fruit. So pretty big strawberries too. We always go organic. I'm gonna show y'all real quick what we messing with the Driscoll's organic berries. We always go organic and seeded fruit as much as possible. Just trying to make sure that it's sustained as well too, that it comes from a good place and that the quality can be assured. So, right, busting down these strawberries pretty easy. I'm not gonna throw all of these inside of them because I mean, like other stuff we can do with them. Honestly, my son was just asking about a smoothie, so I would probably just rip the heads off and set these to the side to make a smoothie. Just because when you cutting fruit and you go through so much fruit, ain't no point of wasting nothing. And I'm gonna show y'all even with the pineapple what I was doing. Instead of put at the doing my shavings, I was squeezing the rest of the juice out of it as well too into the tea, just to get the most that I could out of all my fruit. So that's the best that I can tell you. But right now I'm just cutting strawberries, and we're gonna listen to some Alan Watts. Y'all tap in, drop any comments, conversate with me, whatever y'all want to do. So let's see. Back to my Alan Watts. Oracle Origins. I find it a little. Actually, we're gonna listen to episode 3 of Being in the Way. So if you're on here right now, you can really see if this is something that resonate with you or not. And I don't really touch on much aside of my fruit, but sometimes I do wash my hands with gloves on too. But I know a lot of people who cut fruit or make food, especially in restaurants, with their bare hands, because it is completely safe to use your bare hands if you sanitize and clean your hands really, really well. Soap, water, disinfectant, and then you only touch the food because at that point your hands are clean. But just me being me, I usually use gloves. I switch my gloves. It's probably like my fourth pair of gloves. But to keep changing gloves just because I'm touching like my phone and then touching the fruit or touching something like that, it just seems counterproductive to just keep throwing away pair of gloves that ain't that bad. If it's that bad and I can wash my hands, why not just wash the gloves too? All right. So sometimes I even use some apple cider vinegar. All right, because you can look it up. Apple cider vinegar kill germs, and some baking soda, and then all that does is neutralize any toxins or any germs. What I'm over here doing now? And one thing about vinegar, it always has this very stringent smell. So we're gonna let the tea brew right over here, but I'm gonna dry my pinky off, dry my hands off, just because I want to be able to hit play. All right. It was always expected that future human beings would have enormous heads. Alan Watts, Being in a Way podcast episode. They would be very wise. In science fiction, which was published round about the 1920s, it was always expected that future human beings would have enormous heads because they would have very big brains and they would be very wise. It didn't work that way. What happens is that the human race is building a brain outside its body. That is to say, an interlocking electronic network of telephonic, television, radionic,
communications, which is rapidly being interlocked with computers.
And instead of peeling these things off these strawberries, I'm gonna make my son do it. Cause who?
So that you will, within a few years, be able to plug your own brain into a computer.
My bad. I'm just pulling it up. I was pulling up the chat on my YouTube to check it out and see what the quality was looking like. Just doing a test. I see that that thing is over here in the corner, so I might have to slide the phone down a little bit. The only difficulty with that is I just got the new iPhone 16, and it got a little button that presses if it's over there. So I'm probably gonna end up leaving it out there. With a page, that fruit gonna have you feeling replenished. No, for real. Like you got to be able to really hydrate the cells. But we finna tap back into this Alan Watts, and I hope y'all enjoy and hang out with me, and just come chat with me if you feel like it.
Welcome to Being in the Way with Alan Watts, and I'm your host, Mark Watts. And today we're going to hear the title talk for which this podcast was named, Being in the Way. Now, in the last episode, I outlined some of my father's early life, about how he came to America and ended up teaching Buddhism at the American Academy of Asian Studies in San Francisco. We lived across the Golden Gate Bridge just north of the city, and my father was often busy typing away in his study on his numerous books. With The Way of Zen in 1957, he set out on the first of many integrated works showing the relationship between the various branches of Far Eastern ways of liberation, as he described them. The book quickly became a New York Times bestseller, and the following year he went on a book tour with speaking stops in Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, and Zurich. At the time, he'd been speaking on public radio at KPFA in Berkeley for 5 years and was a reassuring, although still somewhat reserved voice on the Bay Area airwaves. But over the next few years, he began to intersperse his regular radio booth talks with live recordings. The more lively and engaging style of these talks had a dramatic effect on his audience, and his programs were soon being rebroadcast in Los Angeles on station KPFK, where they still air today. Also around this time, KPFA held a fundraiser to buy my father a portable Swiss tape recorder so that he could make more frequent lecture recordings. Working with American folk voice recording artist and audio pioneer Henry Jacobs, my father began a collection that by 1968 included over 200 recordings. When I began recording in 1968, it was on the East Coast, and he was regularly speaking in Chicago, Boston, and Philadelphia. In 1971, I returned to California and, at my father's suggestion, began to assemble what he described as a collection of his essential lectures, which were released in 1972. This time, we also produced a series of videos that we called The Essentials, half-hour talks on specific subjects like God, time, ego, death, nothingness, meditation. And by 1973, looking at the vast collection of seminars, I began to assemble what became electronic college courses from the recordings. When my father passed on in 1973, his final words were, "I wish I could figure out how to do all this without my body." And I think that he has. This podcast was made possible by a grant from the Rizzuto Foundation, and it's being produced with the help of the Ram Dass Be Here Now podcast network. Our theme music is by Zakir Hussain and Rhythm Experience, courtesy of Moment Records. And to find out more about the legacy of Alan Watts, please visit alanwatts.org on the internet. And now here's my father with Being in the Way, Part 1. One of the first things which everybody should understand is that every creature in the universe that is in any way sensitive
and in any manner of speaking conscious, regards itself as a human being. That is to say, it knows and is aware of a hierarchy of beings above it and a hierarchy of beings below it. If you take such a tiny creature as a fruit fly, which lives only a few days, it is aware of all sorts of weird little animals and objects and spores floating in the atmosphere, which we don't even notice unless we've got a microscope around. Very few people have. And it criticizes them as being inferior animals and all that sort of thing, whereas human beings are things that it doesn't comprehend. They're as much outside its intellect as a quasar is outside ours.
Right.
And we see these far-off objects floating in the heavens. We have only the vaguest idea of what they may be. Actually, we may all be some kind of atoms in another dimension. And all these galaxies being the constituent elements. Who knows?
Right.
But there is, I think, a fundamental principle that everybody must understand in order to know what is the meaning of the Tao, or the Chinese sense of the course of nature, and that is the principle of relativity. It's absolutely fundamental to an understanding of Taoist philosophy, relativity. That is to say that wherever you are, and whoever you are, and whatever you are, you're in the middle. And you suggest in the same way as when you stand, say, on the deck of a ship, and you can see a horizon all around you to exactly the same distance. You're in the center of a circle because your senses extend a certain direction in all directions, and therefore give you the impression of being in the middle. Now, everything in the world feels like that. And also it has its own kind, which look natural to it. You see, spiders and hydras and sea urchins and so on don't look very natural to us. We say, well, I wouldn't want to look like that. But they say when they see us, well, what kind of an awful thing is that? And what a lot of nonsense it does. But now, here is a very strange thing. That every creature, therefore, which feels that it is human, and which knows that it's there in the same way as you know you're here, experiences a sensation of a certain tension which constitutes the feeling of I-ness, of there-ness, of being here. Because after all, every creature is a particular form. Everything is individual. Not only you as a total organism standing here, but all the component cells of your body. Each one of them has some sort of a feeling of its own. And it is individual. You can look at a microscope at the right level of magnification, and you can see that thing there.
Right.
With its own little life. And if you examine the stream of your blood, you'll find it full of all kinds of organisms that are having all sorts of conspiracies and games and plots and eating each other and doing these things that like we do. Only we realize that we wouldn't be healthy as a total organism unless there were all these wars and fights and plots and politics going on between the various cells in our blood. But from their point of view, you see, they feel a little bit put out. And we're in the same situation because very slowly the human beings on the surface of the planet are realizing themselves into a total planetary organism with an electronic nervous system. You see, in science fiction, which was published round about the 1920s, it was always expected that future human beings would have enormous heads because they would have very big brains and they would be very wise. It didn't work that way. What happens is that the human race is building a brain outside its body. That is to say, an interlocking electronic network of telephonic, television, radionic communications, which is rapidly being interlocked with computers, so that you will, within a few years, be able to plug your own brain into a computer. you'll have a little gadget here behind the ear that looks slightly like a hearing aid. And that will be integrated with your brain in such a way that you can plug in right here. That will only be an intermediate stage.
Hello? It did? It was that big? Well, that's going to be kind of hard to do driving all the way to Riverdale. Is it already in there? Oh, so what you mean the trunk don't close though? Even with the seat down? So was the trunk like open? He tied it. Okay. So it definitely won't fit inside my car then. What? No, I'm asking. I mean, you can bring it, but I'm asking, do you think it will fit in my car? Right. I'm just trying to gauge the size of it. Okay. I'll check it out when you get here, but thank you. That's what I was thinking. So that's what I was saying. If it ain't gonna fit in your trunk, but you said with my, I'm gonna put it in my car when you get here and test it out. All right. Um, I go get it when I finish cutting fruit. All right.
Because just in the same way as,
Let's go back.
and it would be very wise, it didn't work that way. What happens is that the human race is building a brain outside its body. That is to say, an interlocking electronic network of telephonic, television, radionic communications,
I'm talking about bringing off.
which is rapidly being interlocked with computers. So that you will, within a few years, be able to plug your own brain into a computer.
Which you can basically already do.
You'll have a little gadget here behind the ear that looks slightly like a hearing aid. And that will be integrated with your brain in such a way that you can plug in right here. That will only be an intermediate stage.
He made this in 73.
Because just in the same way as when we thought that all communications by electricity had to go through wires, and then we got rid of the wires and got radio and television. So in exactly the same way, we'll eventually get rid of telephones and radio and television, and we'll communicate by some entirely new method that is at present called ESP. But that will mean that absolutely nobody has a private life anymore. You will have no defenses. Everybody else will see right through you. And some people will protest and say, well, this is terrible. There's no privacy anymore. That means there's no me. Well, that's what's happened to your own cells and your own neurons. They objected that some time in the course of evolution,
Mhm.
we're getting our private life taken away, we're being organized into a body.
Right.
And we're doing the same thing. Only we have got to try and see if we can be clever about it. And that is to say, to do two things at once.
Mm.
To have this tremendous openness to each other, whereby I don't care if you read my thoughts, and you don't care if I read yours. But at the same time, nevertheless, each one of us retains a peculiar individuality. Almost in the same way as nothing could be more unlike a stomach than a heart,
Okay, part of the same body.
despite the fact that it is an organism functioning all together.
Right.
So then the problem, though, as I said, is that for each individual, which is outlined, which is a separate thing, or rather, I would, instead of using the word separate, I would like to use the word distinct.
Mm.
Separate, as I use the word, means disjointed, cut off from. Distinct means a feature of something where an absolutely distinguishable pattern is part of a larger pattern, of a whole. So something can be distinct without being separate, in just the same way as back and front can be very different and yet inseparable. So then, there is then this sensation of practically every living being of constituting a center of tension and of resistance. That is to say, of being a little bit blocked, or shall I say, of being in the way, being in one's own way. Imagine the opposite. Let us suppose, for example, that you got up in the morning with a feeling of total transparency. There's no resistance in your organism to the external world. You just float through it. You're part of it, it's part of you. And just in the same way, for example, that when you see, if you see well, you aren't aware of your eyes. But if there's something wrong with your eyes, you see spots in front of you, then you are looking at your eyes, and your eyes are getting in your own way. So the Taoist sage Zhuangzi says that when clothes fit well, you are not aware of them. When your girdle or belt fits properly, you're not aware of it. Good shoes, you're unconscious of. And so in exactly the same way, the perfect formed man is unaware of himself because he doesn't get in his own way. He is thus, in this sense, completely transparent. Now you were thinking I'm trying to sell you a bill of goods, that I'm going to teach you some technique so that you can feel perfectly transparent. And that this is the proper way to feel, this is the way you ought to feel. Now, it's not that simple. Point is, to begin with, if you do, in a really rather natural way, feel alone and feel a little bit vulnerable, that you've got a soft skin and you've got a weak heart and you've got, all those ills that the human body is heir to going on inside you. Let's begin with that. And the fact we hurt a bit. And through hurting a bit, we know we're here. And this is part of the whole meaning of penances and all sorts of trials that people go through and all kinds of adventures and all sorts of very, very difficult massage experiences and so on, is that as a result of this, it becomes quite apparent that you do truly exist. You're there. You are a kind of an obstacle to the flow of life. And as life impinges upon you, wow, you rebound and you hurt a bit, and so you are there. Now then, although people cultivate this, they say in general, it would be not that way. We'd like to forget ourselves. And so ever so many people say, well, I want something to lose myself in. I want something to belong to. I want to join a religion where I can sort of feel that I take part. I mean something. Or I go to the movies to forget myself. I read a mystery story to forget myself. I get drunk to forget myself. Because the peculiar quality of the drug called alcohol is that it turns you off. It makes you increasingly insensitive to pain and to being and so on, so that you can get a certain vague sense, a rather misty sense of floating. But here it is. So as things stand, one ordinarily doesn't feel that way and therefore takes alcohol or something in order to disappear, in order to feel less this sensation of resisting the world. Do you know, if you study your body and its dynamics, you will find that you are fighting all the time. Most people are, some aren't, but most people are fighting the external world all the time. My friend Charlotte Selver often tries an experiment where she makes a person lie down on the floor and says to them, now look, the floor is solid and it will hold you up. You don't have to do anything to stay where you are. Just lie on the floor. And then she looks at the person, may touch them slightly, and say, do you realize you are making all sorts of efforts to hold yourself together? Because you're basically afraid that if you don't do that, you'll just go and disappear into a kind of formless goo all over the floor. But you won't. You see, your skin, bones, your muscle tonus and everything is all there naturally, and it will hold you together. There's nothing to worry about. And all you have to do is lie on the floor. And you don't have to make any special efforts to stay together. But very many people are afraid that they will fall apart or somehow disintegrate if they don't make efforts to hold themselves together, or else that they will be disintegrated by some outside agency if they're not constantly on the alert like this, all around, you see, to protect themselves.
Anxiety.
Now, I'm not a preacher. That's the most important thing to understand about me. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but I'm inviting you to become immensely aware of the fact that if you do that at all, that you do it. And that you have, therefore, this sense of being alone, of being a particular separate form that is unlike any other form on earth. That's just you. And concentrate on that. After all, for many people, they define this as their problem. So you ought to be able to feel it without the slightest difficulty. Isn't it that I were asking you to feel some transcendental sensation or something of that kind? This is just a very ordinary sense of being you and being alone. Now, as you focus on that sensation of distinctness, we'll even call this one separateness, because we have been brought up to feel separate. We have been brought up to feel actually disjoined from the external world, although that is pure mythology and doesn't exist at all. You're as much part of the external world as a whirlpool is part of a stream. But we're brought up not to notice that. But if you've been brought up that way and you don't notice that you're as much part of the world as a whirlpool is of a stream, you feel this intense separateness. The thing to do with all feelings that you don't like is to experience them as deeply as possible. And go into the inmost depths of loneliness. And indeed, let us say the inmost depths of selfishness. Are you selfish?
Are you selfish?
People try to pretend they're not.
All right.
And say, well, I try not to be, but I guess I don't succeed all the time. And so Krishnamurti, you know, is the very devil because he always roots it out. He shows all the people who are very good and have the highest ideals and who are doing everything, that they are really doing it for the same sort of motivation as other people are robbing banks. And only they're giving it a name so as to conceal it better. See, that's like culture. Culture is a way of more cleverly concealing the fact that you have to eat. Be like the Queen of Spain, who in the days of the 1860s came on with these enormous skirts and floated into the room. And, was sort of coming on like she was an angel. And somebody, when they were first invented, gave her a present of beautiful silk stockings, a dozen pairs, and sent them to the Queen. And Her Majesty's Chamberlain replied with a letter returning the stockings and saying, Her Majesty the Queen of Spain does not have legs. I managed to float along just the same because I'm an angel. So you see, the way in which all kinds of high culture are subtle ways of concealing and pretending that we do without the things that the lower classes, whether of humans or of animals, do. See? We pretend that we don't. It's like you don't go around crudely taking a bull and banging it on the head with a mallet or sticking a knife through it and tearing it apart and eating it. All that's done somewhere off in the stockyard. And it comes to us in the butcher's shop as a completely neutral looking thing called a steak. Right. The steak has absolutely nothing to do with a cow. The steak is something wrapped up, packaged like that, and they all down like that. And nobody, when they pick up a steak and test it, thinks it's poor cow. It doesn't look like a cow. It doesn't remind you of one in any way. So that's culture. But you see, however much you mask it under lofty ideals, I mean, the most religious people in the world, the greatest saints, are the veriest rascals. I've known lots of them. So when anybody is frighteningly holy, you know that that guy is playing an extremely far-out game. Because he has put so many layers and so many wiggles between what he's outwardly doing and his inward, irreducible rascality, that he's a very cultured being indeed, that he's playing a very complicated game. In Hebrew theology, incidentally, it is admitted, quite frankly, that there is a thing called the Yetzer Hara. And in the beginning of time, when God created Adam, He implanted in him the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara means the wayward spirit. He put something funny in man, so that man would be a little odd. And it was a result of the Yetzer Hara that Adam was tempted by Eve, who was tempted by the serpent to eat that famous fruit. But the Hebrew believes that everything that God created is good, including the Yetzer Hara. Because if it hadn't been for the Yetzer Hara, there would have nothing ever happened. Right. Everybody would have obeyed God, and God would have said, well, this is coming to a fall. So, now, you see, you can't just get up to someone and say, disobey me. Because if they do, they're obeying you. See, that's a double bind. Say to somebody to disobey me. But God was much more subtle than that. He didn't tell Adam to disobey him. He told him to obey. But subtly, he put this Yetzer Hara thing like that. So that God would say, well, I'm not responsible. Well, this thing's going to happen on its own. Because what everybody wants is something to happen on its own. On its own. In other words, something comes back. And that's, I'm not quite sure what it's going to do. And it's to the degree that I encounter something like that, that I know it's alive. And everybody wants that. Because you see, the sensation of being you, this curious, lonely center of awkward sensitivity, subject to the most peculiar feelings and pains and anxieties and all that sort of thing. All that is an essential prerequisite for feeling something else. These two experiences go together. If you want, in other words, if you want to be omnipotent, And you want to live in a universe where nothing happens except exactly what you will to happen. In other words, you say, I would like to be God, if you think that's the way God is. And everything is therefore totally under my control. Everything is absolutely transparent to my intelligence. I have no problems. There are a lot of people coming on like they think they've attained this state. People like Meher Baba, who says he's in charge of the universe and knows everything, understands everything, and so on and so forth. Well, that's a lot of bunk. Nobody wants to be in that position because there wouldn't be anything to it. Because once everything is under your central control, well, just nothing is happening. It's a ball from beginning to end. So what anyone or any being whatsoever who has a sense of centrality, who has a sense of selfhood, who has a sense of identity, that sense of identity is inseparable from something else going on that is defined as not being me, as not being under my control, and that may jump at any time. It might even eat me. So what I want you first of all to understand is that these two sensations, one of being the lonely, central, sensitive, vulnerable self, living in the midst of a world that feels other, that is not under your control. Now, I want to try and show you that these two sensations are really one sensation, or rather two aspects of one sensation. You couldn't have the one experience without the other experience. This is a rather good thing to know, because it means that you won't panic if you discover this. People who suffer from chronic anxiety are always in doubt, you see, about this relationship between what I feel as myself and what I feel as something else. Let's suppose you're anxious about your relationship with other people. You walk into a room and some stranger opposite to you. You know nothing about the stranger. And maybe you feel a little reluctant to open conversation. You don't know whether this person is going to be sane, or some kind of a crackpot, or some kind of a awful stuffy square, or you don't know what it is. So you start fencing around a little. But you get the feeling, you see, of, now, I better watch myself, because I do, after all, want to make a good impression. I don't want to make an enemy. So you watch yourself, and this is the funny thing then begins called self-consciousness. And people say sort of to each other, you know, the usual way in which strangers come on. And also there is involved in this encounter the secret games that people are playing all the time.
Listen to them.
To defend themselves by putting other people down.
Right. That's the big thing.
You see, every living being, if the truth be told, is a manifestation of everything that there is.
Manifestation.
It's what we call God in old-fashioned language. Every human being is. And every one, as I look around, I can see every one of you as the divine being coming at me in a different way. Crazy. But the thing is that what we do is to try and prevent people from realizing that this is so. By pointing out to them in the most subtle ways their limitations. And seeing if we can phase them. Put a person off a little bit. Make them uncertain. Make them unsteady. It's like all sorts of games that you can play where if a person wavers, he loses. Where it's absolutely essential that he has total nerve in order to win. But people play that with each other all the time. And the reason they do it is not the reason they think. It is that if everybody were perfectly clear that they were a manifestation of the divine being, nothing very much would happen. But so as to keep everybody a little bit unfair about it, the whole thing plugs itself and creates these little doubts. So what we're beginning with is these little doubts, you see, these sensations of blockage, of not being very sure of yourself, but knowing very much indeed that you are yourself and that you're alone and it's all up to you. The terrible feeling of responsibility. So, but what I'm trying to point out to you is if you intensify that feeling and bring it to its highest pitch, you will immediately realize that you are aware of it only by virtue of the entire sensation of something else, something defined as not you. So the feeling of not you and the feeling of you are relative. They go together, and you can't have the one without the other. And if you can't have the one without the other, that means there's a secret conspiracy between the two. They are really the same, but pretending to be different. Because the whole idea is if there wasn't a difference, you wouldn't know anything was happening. I mean, if it was all the same, it's like that song of Bob Dylan, which says something like, well, I'm just like a guy like you. I'm just like anybody else. No use me talking to you, because you're just like me. So the whole point is then if everybody else were the same and all share the same ideas exactly and so on, there'd be nothing to talk about because everybody would be a bore. There'd be just yourself echoing back at you, you see, and you'd feel like a madman in a hall of mirrors, where everything you went was just yourself, you see, in all directions, just you. Well, that's no fun. But you may think that I'm speaking in favor of some kind of schizoid pluralistic universe. No, the whole point is this, that difference and every kind of variety of differentiation is the way through which unity is discovered. So, however, wherever you notice a difference, the difference has two sides, what it is and what it's not. And these two sides, since you can't have the one side without the other side, they're really one. Because they go together, inseparably. So when you get this extreme sense of your own existence as a rather painful fact in the middle of everything else, the everything else feeling and the you feeling are two poles of one and the same process. So that the real you is what lies between these poles and includes both of them. Now, this is the fundamental principle of the whole way in which ancient Chinese thought developed. The philosophy of the yang and the yin.
Okay.
This is one of the oldest ideas in the universe. I mean, no, that's a rather too big language. On this planet.
Right.
And the philosophy, which I shall have occasion to speak of a little bit more later, of the Book of Changes, the I Ching, is based entirely on this. That the universe is the interplay of difference. And the primordial difference is between up and down, back and front, black and white, is and isn't, male and female, positive and negative. So the word yang in Chinese means or refers to the south side of a mountain, which is the sunny side. The word yin refers to the north side of the mountain, which is the shady side. Did you ever see a south-sided mountain only with no north side? Or it may also, yang may refer to the north bank of a river, which gets the sun, and yin to the south bank of the river, which gets the shade. And so you will remember this great symbol. And one half, of course, is colored. dark, as it were, two fishes interlocked. And they are chasing each other. They actually form, you see more complicated symbols in which they form a helix. And the spiral nebulae are shaped this way, in the form of a helix. And this is the position of man and woman making love, fundamentally. Where I'm trying to get inside you, and you're trying to get inside me, and we're trying to get into the middle of each other, but there's somehow or other a difference, and we can never quite get there. Just like if I want to see the back of my head, I can go round and round and I can chase it, but I never quite catch up with it. But that's what makes everything work. It is said in the Vedanta Sutras that the Lord, the Supreme Knower of all things, who is the knower in all of us, doesn't know itself. In the same way that fire doesn't burn itself and a knife doesn't cut itself. So nothing to God, even, you see, would be more mysterious than God. Do you know somehow how you surprise yourself? For example, when you feel your own pulse, you suddenly feel this life going on, which you're not willing. Or there are all sorts of ways in which you can say you have the belly rumples. And you didn't intend to have the belly rumples, and suddenly it happened, or you have hiccups. And now, are you having hiccups or not? Is this something you're doing? Or is it merely something that's happening to you, as if it was raining and the rain was happening to you? This is a very debatable question. Consider breathing. Are you breathing, or is it breathing you? Well, you can feel it either way. You can decide to breathe and feel that you're breathing in just the same way that you walk when you want to. On the other hand, when you forget about breathing altogether, it still goes on. And so it seems to be something that happens to you. Which is it? Do you grow your hair? Or does your hair just grow by itself? What enables you to make a decision? When you decide, do you first decide to decide? Or do you just decide? Now, how do you do that? Nobody knows, you see. When Zhuangzi tells the story that one philosopher asked another, how can one get the Tao, which is the power of nature, so as to have it for one's own? And the other philosopher answers, your life is not your own. It is the delegated adaptability of Tao. Your offspring are not your own. They are the outputs of Tao. You move, you know not how. You are addressed, you know not why. These are the operations of Tao. So how could you have it for your own? That's a funny thing. We can experience ourselves through and through as something that just happens.
Right.
Look at it this way. If you feel your body, your skin, the solidity of you, and regard what marvelous eyes you have, which are the power which generate light and color out of all these electrical quanta in the external world. And these ears, these beautiful shells that you wear on the side of your head, with their little spiral bones, the cochlea inside, you know, all that. But you don't feel responsible for this. You don't know how it's made, if it is made, but it's you. That's what you are. That extraordinary pattern. Beautiful, gorgeous, wonderful arabesque of tubes and bones and cartilage and myriads of interconnecting electronics and nervous systems and everything wonderful. See, but the point is, most people don't own this. They don't say this is me. They say, well, is some kind of very clever machine which the Lord God made out of his infinite wisdom and put me in it. And this is a very limited view. Because the extraordinary thing is, you see, that this is you. This extraordinary, marvelous goings on. See? But you can feel it, all of it, as if it was just happening to you. But if you want to feel it that way, then you've got to go the whole way, and you've got to feel that your decisions just happen to you. And that the thing that you call yourself, which things happen, is just something that happens. See? You don't know how you managed to be an ego, how you happen to be conscious. That just happened too. So happenings happen to a happening. So you can feel yourself completely irresponsible like that. See? There's nowhere. Or when you get that way, that's a very interesting road to run. But you can try the other way. You can extend it and say, now look here. If I really am my eyes, now although I don't understand them, I mean, let's say I can't describe it in lines, in words. But this is me. It's extraordinary thing if it is. But I don't understand how it happens. But then, you see, that's the whole point. As I made a little while ago, that the very Lord God himself doesn't understand how he happens. Because if he did, what would be the point? There'd be no mystery. There'd be no possibility of surprises. That's why there has to be yang and yin. Yang is bright and it understands everything. Yin is dark and damned if she'll be understood. There are two phases of the same being. And so your yang side is your conscious attention and all the bright things you know and all the information you have and all the know-how that you know what to do. And your yin side is the other side of the yang, which enables the yang to function because you don't know why the yang side of you functions. That is the conscious, bright, intelligent side of you. It all depends on something you don't understand at all. Because if it didn't, it wouldn't be there. It's like you wouldn't be here unless there was something else. So they move together. And therefore, if you will accept the idea that you are your own eyes and your own heart and your own ears with that wonderful little spiral here inside and all these amazing gadgets here. You're all that. But you don't know anything about it, but you are it. Now, therefore, by a little extension of the imagination, you can very well see that if all those bones and subtleties inside you feel other than your conscious ego, but nevertheless are one with it, the same argument will go for all the other things going on around you. The sun shining, the stars twinkling, the wind blowing, and the great ocean restlessly pounding against these cliffs. That's you too. You don't control it, of course, because there has to be something about you don't control, or it wouldn't be you. I see that all that is less than elementary relativity. And relativity, I've talked about it in this way, which is kind of unscholarly and so on. But I wanted to get the message across, the idea across. Because to understand the principle of relativity is the absolute foundation of the philosophy of the Tao. Lao Tzu takes it up in his second chapter when he says, when all the world understands beauty to be beautiful, there is already ugliness. When all the world understands goodness to be good, there is already evil. Thus, to be and not to be arise mutually. High and low are posited mutually. Long and short are compared mutually. And he goes through a whole list of opposites and show how they create each other. It's like that wonderful little parable. The Chinese character for man looks more or less like an upturned V. And that Kario Hearn in one of his books tells a story of a Japanese girl telling her little sister the meaning of the character for man by taking two sticks of wood and balancing them together on the ground, two sticks of firewood, so that they form the upturned V. And she says to her little sister, this is the character for man. Because neither stick will stand up unless it has the other to help it.
Right.
But the profounder meaning underneath this is there's no self without other. And no man, and don't forget, get back to the original point. Every creature in the world feels it's a man. I don't mean a male, but a human. And that is because it is in this situation where the thing it feels as itself, as its separate identity, is supported by the equal and opposite sensation of other. Center, periphery. Here, there, now, then. Is, or whatever. These two are the yang and the yin, the two poles that hold each other up. So the Zen poem says, when misfortune comes, treat it as a blessing. When fortune comes, treat it as a disaster.
Whoa.
This podcast was made possible by a grant from the Rizzuto Foundation, and it's being produced with the help of the Ram Dass Be Here Now podcast network. Our theme music is by Zakir Hussain and the Rhythm Experience, courtesy of Moment Records. And to find out more about the legacy of Alan Watts, please visit alanwatts.org on the internet.
I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you were able to stick it out for that, definitely some jewels dropped in there. If we want to just go over a few of them while I summarize before I go ahead and end this stream and finish cutting up this fruit, just because I got company on the way and I got to leave and go get my sister after I finish making these bowls too. When I get a dedicated videographer, then I'll be able to shoot a little bit more full time. And then some places I go into, like when I'm spending quality time with my family, or I'm doing certain things, I won't be streaming. And I do have a lot of intimate moments in my life where I don't stream. So I'm trying to get a good balance of what to put out there and what I shouldn't put out there, but still giving y'all as much in depth with my personal life as possible. I'm working on that as well too. And the reason I say that is because that's the whole point. I started streaming. A lot of these streamers, they have very little substance. I don't want, well, for me, I'm 30, so I don't want to sit back and watch kids play games, play video games. I don't want to see, respectfully, I don't want to see Casanat at the BET Awards and doing rich people stuff. I want to see people who are going through the same thing that I'm going through. So when I see hustling entrepreneurs, when I see healers and speakers and people and parents and people who have real life problems, and you can also see their real life problems and their real life successes, that's something that I would want to see. And I don't know many live streamers that are showing that type of stuff instead of just sitting back talking about nonsense or attempting to be an influencer without any pushing any objective. I do have an organization called Atlanta Healing Community. So this is just one thing that I like to do as well too, is by provide fresh fruit, but we also try to provide the community with holistic resources. And we also are working on our mentorship for the youth. But obviously, a lot of things are still in progress. This is our first year fully established. So we're still building a foundation, still building our network and our resources to be able to share with the community. But if you are interested in more of that stuff, like what you just heard as well too, Alan Watts, I will be scheduling a night where we will be talking about collective consciousness, where we will be talking about consciousness itself as well too, different states of consciousness, mental health for sure, right? And then just oneness and basically how we're gods and how we're eternal beings and death and ego and perceptions and just a lot of different concepts that a lot of people don't discuss, I guess, or more uncharted water when it comes to general conversation. So those are the things that I like to talk about. I like deep conversation personally, just like I like fresh fruit. I love deep love. I love deep living. I don't like to do anything half-assed. So that's just the way that my life has taken me. So if you're interested in that type of stuff, make sure you tap in, subscribe, come check back in. I'm actually preparing these fruit bowls for this weekend. I will be out vending fresh fruit bowls and fresh coconut water as well too. And I ain't talking about coconut water out the bottle. I'm talking about coconut water out the actual coconut. Um, I drink a bunch of them a day. I actually need one now, but I'm gonna wait till I finish. And yeah, we're gonna drink some coconut water. We got some kids we finna be babysitting, including my kids, but I guess you can't babysit your own kids, technically. So I'm finna have the kids over here, family, my little sister, and we probably gonna watch a movie and play some games or do something, you know. And that's how my night's going. I won't necessarily show y'all the time that I have with the kids this time, but you will see us out tomorrow. I'm selling fruit at Heroes for ATL. It's a run club. They start at 10:30, but it's very questionable because it's supposed to rain. And it's literally been raining every freaking weekend for like the last 2, 3 months. So, but again, Alan Watts, we will talk about more of those subjects if you feel anything specific about that, and let me know. But I'm gonna go ahead and hop off. I'm finishing my kiwis. After I do these kiwis, what I would generally do is cut them into slices, round slices, basically. And then that's literally the last of my fruit. I'm gonna make the word fresh fruit out of the watermelon scraps I got, but y'all will have to see that tomorrow as well too, because I just wanted to hop on for a little bit. But the more interaction that we get, especially when I'm live streaming, the more I'll stay on in the future. But I appreciate y'all. Much love. Deuces. And I will see y'all soon. What's up, C. James? Make sure you tap into that Alan Watts if you didn't get a chance to.